Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to another episode of Boys in the Cave. This podcast is proudly supported by Nut Watchman Sports and Muslim Youth Today. My name is Tanzim, and today I have my co-host Josh back with me. How's it going, Josh?
Not too bad.
That's good. So, alhamdulillah, we actually have a beautiful brother, and we've been waiting for you to come on our show for a while now because we're in contact with you quite a bit. But I think one thing is for sure is that we focus too much sometimes naturally, being part of, the globalized society we want to look to the big guests all the time, the big namers with the big 1,000 followers and whatever, but it's always the communal aspect that we kind of neglect, don't you think?
Yeah, there are all these brothers and sisters hidden in the community that we don't know exist until we find out about them. In this case, it was through our co-host Raphael, who sort of found out about Ahmed here, and he told us he runs an archery club. He's very knowledgeable in Ottoman history, and he thought he'd be a great guest to have on. So
just to give him quick intro, so we have a dear brother, Ahmed Karat. He is an IT consultant as a day kind of job, but the main thing is that he's a president of the Maydaan Archery Club here in Sydney. So it's around Bringelly, is that how you say it?
Yeah,
Leppington. All right, sweet. So, and you've done archery for 14 years?
Yes, going on. Yeah, roughly.
And then you said you've also hunted and all that stuff as well.
Yes. I have hunted, mainly animals. We do a fair bit of hunting with the bow and arrow. It's a bit more challenging than with a rifle. And it's a lot more satisfying when you actually harvest an animal. Hunters don't call the action killing, we call it harvesting, because we only hunt for stuff that we eat.
So all the game that you've killed, you've eaten as well?
Either I have eaten directly, or somebody of my extended family or community have had a taste.
Yeah. And a lot of people would say, especially maybe vegans, for example, they'll say it's cruel, you're just going out there and killing animals. What would your response be?
I have the utmost respect for vegans.
Yeah.
But we live, it's an interesting topic on its own, but first of all, I don't like supporting a meat industry that thrives off torturing animals and treating them inhumanely. So I have enough respect for the animal to go and do it myself, and know that it's been done correctly in my book and as painlessly as possible. And to vegans especially, first of all, I'd like to say I don't know how you guys do it, because staying without meat, I don't think I could ever do it. But when you look at, their argument is all around ecosystems and making sure that nature takes its course and everything else. When you look at it, our ancestors, survived by hunting. And hunting actually helps. If you do a bit of research in Australian, on a lot of blogs and I'm sure podcasts, hunting preserves healthy ecosystems. Like hunting deer and culling deer, so to speak, through hunting helps farmers, but our ecosystem wasn't designed for the deer. There's no big animals to hunt it. So by us killing them off or by us harvesting them, we're actually doing the ecosystem a favor, because all the other animals that are local to Australian bush get a better chance of survival.
And like you were saying, like when you hunt the animal yourself, there's a certain sense of harmony to it, as in certain Islamic sense of justice, that I revere the animal, that I respect it. I respect it enough that I killed it myself and then me and my people, my family, my community will eat that meat that I know directly comes from this. Whereas the modern meat industry, for example, just the mass production and how it's so mechanized, as in that takes away completely.
It desensitizes you. And for example, if anybody hunts, puts their blood, sweat and tears into harvesting an animal, I bet you they will not throw that meat away easily.
Yeah.
They will not eat as much, right? And they'll eat it. When they eat it, they'll have a certain spiritual connection with I know, as funny as it sounds, but they'll have a connection with that food.
Yeah.
And no, actually, every time they take a morsel, they'll say, I worked for this really hard. Don't throw it, don't waste it. I think the root cause of all problems today is greed and hunger and all that. And I think this nullifies that, the action in itself.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we look from the perspective of, people are like, just killing them in general is barbaric and all that kind of stuff. And there's this certain image that's portrayed. But then at the same time, if you look at from your perspective, which you just mentioned, is that because you've hunted them and stuff, you want to treat it with more respect because you don't want to throw it away and waste it. So it's like two different sides, but essentially they're trying to, I guess, get to the same conclusion, but it's done through different ways. And I think I think that's why Islam and the Sunnah comes into it to really differentiate what's right and wrong in that sense. So that's why we know, obviously, through the Sunnah, it's halal to do it. It's not haram. You know
Absolutely,
what I mean?
Yeah. But at the same time, like our eating of meat is completely different to how modern society eats meat. As in, we should, it's in the Sunnah to have it maybe once a week, every 40 days, things like that. And like you were saying, just being connected to the animal in that way.
And your way of doing justice is the fact that you go out there, because you don't want to, you just mentioned you don't want to go by the national corporations that do all the killing and, you know, providing in the supermarkets and stuff. You go do it yourself because you see the injustices that are happening in the multinational companies. So it's a different way of taking
But also the health benefits. I suffer from something called idiopathic thrombocytopenia. It stands for ITP, and it's a blood condition that comes from processed food.
Really? From processed food?
So, my brother-in-law is a clinical research manager at Concord Hospital.
Yeah.
And they did a recent study that says most of the ITP conditions, idiopathic means I don't know where it's from. Basically, they don't know what causes it. I was diagnosed with ITP, and my father's a butcher, so I lived most of my life on meat, you know. And the meat that we eat today is poison.
Yeah.
It's full of hormones, full of steroids, full of GMO. The stuff that we're fed today is just pure poison. The fact that I go out and hunt a free-range organic animal that was free all its life, enjoyed most of its life, okay, even though the action could be considered as cruel, but it died happy. While the meat that others eat, the animal was purely harvested for meat. Its life was miserable. Its food was rubbish. And it was just there as, you know, like in a factory. So, you know, whether you eat meat like I said, I respect vegans for not eating meat at all. I couldn't do it myself, I think. But it's the people who eat meat and then judge other hunters for wanting to hunt their own meat that I really have a problem with.
Yeah.
And it goes back to like what food is tayyib and good and wholesome, and obviously the way you're looking to do it, where the cow or whatever animal was healthy and bred in a certain way, where obviously with the ethics of Islam, if you're following it will be in a good state, and you'll get more barakah in the food. And obviously we know even Islamically it affects us not just physically but spiritually in that sense as well, compared to obviously mass production and all that kind of stuff.
100%. Losing touch.
But yeah, Ahmed, just tracking back to your archery.
Yeah, because we don't want to. So it's like a health option. Health episode.
Health.
That's what we know you for. What was your experience? Could you go a bit more into that? So, you said you had your first 10 years your first 10 years using a composite.
A compound.
A compound. Sorry.
So it's a very cool looking contraption. It has wheels.
It's the mechanical ones, right?
Yeah. It has a sight, it has a rest, it has all these different bells and whistles on it, and it's pretty much like a rifle, you could say. There's a front sight and a back sight, and then you can adjust for elevation and just send your arrow, and it'll be going, if you're any good, it'll be going arrow into an arrow. So very mechanical and very pleasing to shoot with.
Very precise.
Yeah, very precise.
Yeah.
After 10 years, as I mentioned to you before, I read a book written in the 13th century by a Muslim scholar, and they don't know who wrote it. He's called Amin Silah of the Mamluks at the time. He was a Mamluk himself. They kind of pinpointed him, and in terms of who he was was also referred as Al-Yunani, the Greek one.
Yeah, I've heard of Al-Yunani.
So he's it could have been him, but I read his book translated by Nabi Amin Faris, done in the 1940s. After I read that, I had to relearn everything. I realized I knew nothing about archery in those 10 years.
So who taught you archery before that moment you had?
One of my mashaykh, actually, because in the hadith of teach your children 3 things.
Yeah.
When it was explained, teach your children 3 things. When it talks about marksmanship, it doesn't refer to just archery. It refers to any hand-eye coordination, hitting things from a distance. So it's not just archery. There's other hadith that mention archery. But in this particular hadith, it's not just archery. So he introduced me in 2004 to the compound bow. He's from America himself, young sheikh, who's very knowledgeable. And from then on, I fell in love with it. But before that, as a kid, in Bosnia, we grew up in forests.
And you guys, so archery went back then?
Make our own bows.
So even growing up, that was a big thing for you?
It was a big thing for anyone who grew up in natural habitat. Human should, next to a forest, be able to climb a tree and make his own toys instead of, buying them.
Yeah, even earlier today, so for our guests, we went shooting at...
we should probably talk about
the Ahmed's archery club, and he was teaching us the basics because we've never done it before, me and Tanzim. And there was a certain, as in, you watch someone doing archery on film, you're like, yeah, that's cool, it's a sport. But when you do it yourself, there's a certain sense of satisfaction, or how can I explain it? Certain sense of power, having that in your hand and being able to have the technique down right and do it properly.
And there's like a certain, what I realized is that, I think you alluded to it before we started, is that there's like the science of the heart manifested in the bow and the arrow and how you move. And that's something very powerful. That, like, before we go any further, it's like shout out to your hospitality. You gave us this sounds like the best guest ever. Like, fed us and then took us archery before our actual episode recording. So it was a different experience altogether. But at the same time, made me realize even just the art of archery, and obviously it's like a lost sunnah in that sense. But what made you? Was it more so like your love for archery, man, because you grew up in the nature kind of thing, or?
Right. So I found the need in the community, and it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. I tried to revive that, or try to get in touch with youth, because we're done fixing broken men, like we said. We need to fix the youth. We need to build the new generation, and we need to connect to them on some level. And I have an MMA background, and I tried to do it through that way, but I didn't. First of all, I had an injury. I had to stop, and it was meant to be. But I tried to connect on these levels with youth, because I found that there's a gap in the youth where they can go outside of their home environment or where they're based to another environment that's safe enough for them to get influence from. That's outside even the masjid or other circles. So I saw that need for the youth to get back in touch with their cultural heritage and community, but also to build traits that perhaps their parents weren't able, not willing, but not everybody has the ability to take their kid to a forest. Not everybody has the ability to provide these things to their children. So we're trying to fill that gap through this club, and it's not just archery that we do. We focus on the attributes of the sunnah sports, not the sunnah sports themselves.
What was really crazy to me was the way you were explaining the archery to us. You were likening the pulling of the bow to prayer, and how it's something you repeat and you perfect. And even the actions, how you hold your hand itself, how it mimics how you put your finger up in prayer. It's shahad.
Can you explain that to
it was just blowing your mind. And like how in Ottoman times you were explaining how they kissed the bow and then put it to their forehead because it was an extension of themselves.
It's to show respect. The concept of archery, or the concept of any sunnah sport, a Muslim, when he approaches something, if he does it with his heart, he has to do it spiritually. We have no other way to do it. We can't. It's not in our DNA, right, so to speak. So even archery, when the scholars wrote about it, they had something called tafakkur. They would look at not just the painting, but the painter. Right? So they had that inner vision. When they looked at a bow, they transcended just an object.
The bow. It's not something just to use in your wartime or to protect yourself or hunt. It's manifesting your very person.
Exactly. And it's not me coming up with all this stuff. It's what I've read and what I've learned from others who learned it from others. Because as you know, archery is as old as humanity itself. According to a hadith that I failed to mention to you guys because I got interrupted. But Adam alayhi salam was the first archer.
Really?
He's the first one who
That's a
got
hadith.
taught the self-bow because crows were attacking his crops. And he asked Allah, Ya Allah, how do I get rid of them? So Allah enlightened him or revealed to him the making of a bow, an arrow. Later lost to be revived by Sayyidina Ibrahim.
SubhanAllah.
Sayyidina Ibrahim, under a saying, is the first one who made the composite bow. Not compound, composite.
Composite.
Because it's made of 4 things.
So use different materials
Different.
to make them.
It's not a self-bow. A self-bow is just like an arc.
Yeah.
A composite actually has curves and waves.
Curves, yeah.
It's a lot more advanced. And he passed that knowledge of making and using the bow to his son Ismail, alayhi salam. And we know this from the hadith, when he came to Ismail's house and said, where is Ismail? The lady said, where was he? He went out hunting. His bow was missing.
SubhanAllah.
And then she complained to him, and he told her to pass on the message to change the entry point of the house, the assets.
All right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how we got the first bow and the second.
It makes so much sense how the reason why archery itself specifically is a sunnah sport then, because it has this whole tradition of the history of mankind, as in of our prophets, of humanity in general. But even beyond the prophets, you were explaining to us the great tradition of the Ottoman Empire and the Ottoman people who sort of perfected the bow, you were saying. Or as in, like...
Oh, yes. If you want to compare it, if you want to say and the opinion of most people, and probably even to an extent myself, Japanese perfected the katana.
Yeah.
The sword. Okay? And if Japanese perfected the katana, the Turks must have perfected the composite. Because under their rule, archery hit its zenith.
Yeah.
So under the Turk rule in the 16th century, it was golden age for archery. There was no better place to be than Istanbul for archers, bowyers, makers. There were over 500 shops in Istanbul alone making bows. At the time. 500 just for bows. Not talking about arrowsmithing. We're talking just making bows. They were very specialized.
That reminds me how you just mentioned about people, when they're firing the shot, they look at the person themselves as well, or analyzing the person, because that's the same as people when they do, for example, painting or architecture, which even to these current times, the Islamic art and architecture is kind of lost, and we have a rich history with calligraphy and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And what those few calligraphers of this time are saying is that they analyze the person as well, because if the person is doing with sincere love and passion, obviously sincerity in their action, for the sake of Allah, they'll manifest in the painting itself. So they'll see, like, even though you can't explain it from a spiritual sense, I don't know how to explain it, but is that, I don't know, some sort of barakah like translates across or something, I have no idea. But you look at the painting, you see the painter themselves, they did it with love. But whereas if someone is painting the same thing but has different emotions like anger and hatred
or no emotions,
sadness,
which is the most dangerous.
Exactly. And they try to paint the exact same thing, or even a 3D printer doing the same thing. That same feeling you're going to have seeing an actual painter who had those feelings of, love and compassion. It's not going to come across, subhanAllah. So it's like the same thing with archery as well, where to be a good archer, you can't just be like trying to, I don't know, you can probably go into more, but can you be with hate and, you can do archery in that kind of vain way. And
you mentioned when we were doing the, at some point when you were teaching us that the Muslims weren't vengeful people, I think.
Yeah,
did
well,
istikhara.
When they trained their soldiers, they trained them to protect. Rather than destroy. The Turks had a term for a type of mission, means headlessness. So they would order you. They said, "Men, we're not ordering you to go and fight. We're ordering you to go and die." They had a term.
Really?
Because those were the really difficult missions to do, and then they got promoted. The point is, the whole concept of selflessness in Islam. You are supposed to be selfless, not selfish. Because, and the ultimate sacrifice is giving up your life for who? For Allah.
Yeah.
But what do other people see? They see you're giving it up for others. When you look at the big picture of the worldly things, people are giving up what they have most precious to them for others, essentially. You look at it. So
that reminds me of the hadith, the first 3 people to enter Jahannam, It's like one that did jihad not for the sake of Allah, but
Yes.
for the people, for
Yes.
pride. So it
Yeah.
comes back to what you were saying.
Exactly,
as well.
sincerity.
Exactly. So,
When you were teaching us about how to draw, it was the fourth step. So how to draw the string away from the bow. You told us that the Ottoman soldiers, they had to practice that step 600 times with each hand before they were allowed to even put an arrow into
Yeah,
their bow.
before touching an arrow.
Before
So it wouldn't
touching
be
an arrow.
Ottoman soldiers because they started as children.
They started as children.
So-
so these were the Janissaries, you were saying.
So the Janissary Corps was based on a model called the Mamluks.
Mamluks, yeah.
That's what they were modeled on, and they were saying their only purpose was to be fighters. They were professional soldiers.
Yeah.
They started very early on, and they usually started at 13 years old, and that's all they did all their lives. But the Turks developed a system of teaching, and that system involved purely just drawing an empty bow before touching an arrow, and then shooting at a very close range distance, and then shooting at a further distance, right? And they had criteria for you to progress. You had to meet certain criteria. Archery in itself inherently fights few things, few of the diseases of the heart. One of them is kibr,
Yes.
riya. One of them is pride.
This is what you were saying. There was
Pride is the worst enemy of the archer.
you had a saying, don't go beyond what you can. It was the manliness, as
Yes,
a man
yes,
does
so-
not. What was
So
it?
many.
Yeah.
It is unmanly to draw a bow beyond your means.
Beyond
It
your
is
means.
unmanly for you to shoot a bow that is too heavy for you.
And that wasn't just about the bow. It was about everything.
Everything else.
Everything
So-
else.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about the stance and, archery and its stance and the knock itself and every single arkan of the rukun of arkan of archery. They all have a metaphorical message.
Could you run us through each of those arkan?
So the first rukun is the stance.
The stance.
The stance involves not just standing the way you physically stand, but it's also your mental standing, how you mentally approach a piece of work. If you're going to do something khair, then you begin it with basmala. And that's why when the Turks draw a bow, they always say bismillah.
Bismillah.
Yeah. And when they knock an arrow, which is the next point, they say Ya Allah. They invoke His name. And they say, when you knock an arrow, your heart should open. When you knock an arrow, your heart should open. That's number 2. Number 3 is the draw of the bow. When they say Bismillah. And then they aim, place their niyyah, and by saying Allah Akbar, it brings us to the 5th, the loose or the release, which is the 5th and final of the 5 arkan of Imam Ishaq al-Raqi, which is one of the madhabs of archery.
Speaking of the madhabs of archery, so how does that work? So were there different schools of thought regarding how,
Exactly.
like,
How you
what is the
should
best
anchor
way
it?
to shoot an arrow?
Yes.
As in, what did it come down to? Like the grip? Sorry, not the grip. The sort of the finger shooting or the
It's
thing
minor
shooting?
differences.
Minor differences,
Yeah.
but I think for them it mattered a lot. As in, it was
It was minor differences, but it's something that the scholar who wrote the book, when he said وَهَذَا قَوْلُ أَرْجَحْ, and that is a stronger opinion of the 3, I knew that he had to have some sort of Islamic education prior to writing this book, because he must have been a faqih or something. But he compiled the 3 main schools of thought. For example, Imam al-Tabari was one of them, who wrote the Kitab al-Wadih. He was also master archer. There were so many master archers in our culture. And Imam Bukhari, Imam Shafi'i, they were all master archers. We don't know about this. But yeah, it's fantastic because they anchored the bow in a different place, and they held the bow in a different way, and they held their stance in a different way. But everything transcended in terms of the purpose of archery is to empty your mind. They all agreed that when you do archery, your mind has to be empty. If your mind is busy, you will miss the shot. You saw me shoot today. There was an event, and my mind was somewhere else.
yeah.
And it shows. It shows when you shoot. If your mind is not present, if you're not present there, it shows downrange. And just like when we make dua as well, if you're not present in the moment of making
You
dua,
can feel it in yourself.
you'll be sending your arrows, but
Yeah.
they won't be hitting the mark.
Subhanallah.
And there's so many
Subhanallah.
analogies between archery and everyday life, of a Muslim.
It's just really profound to me how, like, as Muslims, we try to, like, something as simple as archery that many cultures had. What we did is we applied our Islamic view of the world to the archery, as in we made it our own, as you were saying earlier about the bow being an extension of the Muslim himself. So that was just something just didn't occur to me before, that there could be so much depth to that.
Do you feel like there's more the Islamic archers over history were more just basically better at doing archery than the rest of how the world was doing at that time?
No, I don't think so. I think there was some very good non-Muslim archers, and I think there were some pioneers. It's just that it so happened that during the spread of the Ottoman period, the bow, and there's a hadith, that Prophet ﷺ, son of Adam, never held a weapon more perfect than the bow. Son of Adam never held a weapon more perfect than the bow. And there's a reason to that. Because under the bow, which was the preferred weapon of most Muslims, or most Muslims' army, Islam spread quite rapidly. It came to my nation using the bow and arrow.
Yeah.
For example, Bosnia, where I'm from, Constantinople was also conquered when the bow was a weapon. It wasn't during firearms. It was more during the bow and arrow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't just Muslims. It was just a time of right place and right time and right hand. Because in the past, you've got Attila the Hun, who used the bow in a devastating effect.
Attila the Hun, that was from the Mongolian. Attila the Hun's from Spain.
Yeah, so he conquered all the Hungary and all.
Oh, from that side,
up to Spain. So he was a horse archer. So it was the combination of an archer that is highly mobile that made it such a deadly combination, and its high rate of fire. Because I explained to you guys that in the West, archers were always static when they shot, while in the East, archers were on the move and shooting. It was dynamic.
And you explained to us the difference also in terms of how they held the arrow. Sorry,
we held it
so
with
it was the thumb. So
yes,
as in, you were teaching us that one today, and you wouldn't let us use the finger grip because it's so much easier. The thumb, after about 10 shots, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was trying my best, but it hurt so much.
We'll get you a ring next time.
Yeah, next time. But as in, it's like I could feel like how much more precise it was. You could hold the arrow down so it doesn't move. I tried it with the fingers a few times, but it just kept shaking. So it's just a completely different type of archery that the Muslims had, that we had.
Absolutely. It's also like I said, the Turks perfected it, and they used the thumb grip to do that. There's many benefits to shooting with the thumb and shooting off the thumb, to shooting with fingers and shooting off the hand. Comparative. Yeah.
But you're taking us back to what you were saying near the beginning of our episode about, what was it, Abu Yunani, the books you learnt this method from, moving away from the compound bows. So is that where you learnt the thumb grip?
Yes.
For the first time?
Yes, I had to self-learn that, and then I ended up taking 4 months off and traveling to Turkey and studying under one of the pioneers, in my opinion, of Turkish archery. His name is Murat Ozveri, and also establishing ties with a club, the oldest archery club probably in the world, called Otçular Vakfi. It's based in Istanbul, formed in the 1400s by Sultan Murad II, who was an archer himself. He held several archery world records by his hand. I think he outshot the 800-meter mark in terms of distance with a bow and arrow.
Wow, is there a record for that? Is it?
Yeah, currently held by Sultan, not Suleiman. I'm not sure if it was Sultan Suleiman or Sultan, one of the Salatina. I need to review my books.
And that's
it was 980 meters. So it was in a certain discipline. It was called flight archery, and it's the business of just lobbing an arrow as far as you can. And
that would be like at a 45-degree angle, straight into
43 degrees.
40. What makes 43
because it
degrees
defies
better?
physics. Because when the arrow is pushed, it travels up like this and
Okay.
changes its angle.
Because I know from I know from my mathematics study, 45 degrees is the optimal angle.
Yes, in a bubble.
In a perfect world.
In a bubble.
In
In
the mathematical
perfect world.
equations,
It's
but
like wind resistant, all that.
Yeah, because you're not holding the arrow itself. You're holding under the arrow.
Okay.
So that plays with the angle.
okay.
So if you were holding onto the arrow and you pulled, probably 45 would be
So
fine.
it pushes it up a bit. Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot more to it.
So when you actually apply the theory of something like
Physics.
archery
Yeah.
and taking it as far as possible, it's like the archer knows things that like the maths will never know.
Trial and error. It's
Trial
just
and error.
experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, the same concept applies. 45. We don't disagree with the 45 angle rule, but that just we hold it at 43 degrees so that we get a 45 degree release.
Have you tried yourself your greatest flight distance?
I haven't competed. I've shot over just over 350.
Just over 350.
In today's world, the record stands at 768, and that was just a couple of days ago that somebody, a guy from Poland called Adam Karpovich, managed to do the 160-pound horn bow and a very light arrow.
Oh yeah, it has to be a light arrow
Yes.
to go as far as
It's a
possible.
special type of arrow. So
Yeah.
arrowsmithing itself, they say when you become, this is the other thing that archery wakes up a certain sense of craftsmanship in people.
Definitely.
People want to go and learn leather making. People want to go and learn calligraphy. People want to go and learn how to make a bow themselves. It just wakes a certain hunger up in people.
I've seen the same thing like with the Japanese katana, as you were saying, as in just forging that perfect steel, as in just like putting it back into the furnace, as in making sure it's perfect before you sort of make it solid and just, form the actual shape of the sword itself. As in you have to make several layers upon layers and layers of the sheets of metal. As in it's the same thing with archery, right? As in when you carve the bow out of the wood, sort of thing.
Well, making a horn and sinew bow takes 9 months.
9 months to do by hand.
Yes.
Okay.
Even by machine.
Even by machine.
Because it's the gluing and the drying process. It needs to dry in a certain season.
In a certain season?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, see, Muslims looked at nature in the past. When you look at the way we lived, we looked at hacking nature, not messing with nature.
Yeah.
So if we had nature at our disposal, we tried to get the best out of it without tampering with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when they took these materials and they put it together, first of all, we believe it's a revelation from Allah that this bow came to us through Sayyidina Ibrahim. And the way it's made is, there's you perfect it over time, but you have to look at from the tree. You look at the tree. For example, there's four types of trees. One of them, because I'm Bosniak, one of the trees that Turks use was called Bosnian golden apple tree as the base of the bow. When they picked the tree for the bow, they looked at what side of the tree was affected by the sun. So they would take the other side.
Other side, the richer side. It still had.
But look at the way that they looked at the tree.
Yeah.
And how they harvested. Do you take the sunny side or do you take the shade side?
Yeah.
And when they looked at the animal for the sinew, they said, take the animal that has been deprived of water for extended period of time. So if there was a drought, you would go hunt water buffalo, because that would be the best time to get their Achilles heel ligaments for the sinew.
Oh, that's what they use, the ligaments from the...
Yeah, so they would take the ligaments, they would dry them.
Yeah.
And then they would boil them, then beat them until they become like hair-like fibers.
And that would be the strongest material of that.
That would be the elasticity of the bow.
Elasticity is, yeah.
And the bow and the horn would be the back of the bow, which would give it compression. So you would have elasticity and compression. So when they
both
let
of them
go,
added together?
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow, so many elements to that.
Yes. So it just goes to show the approach, to everything, I guess, that Muslims should have is, you need to have a spiritual side. And I think that's why our club is, gaining so much traction, is because we're doing something different. We can't necessarily compete with compound shooters or Olympic recurve shooters, but what we cater to and offer as a community, not just a club, is that spiritual and meaningful connection to something that you do after a long day's work in IT or whatever. If you're a builder, you're stressed out, you go and you send a few arrows flying, you will see your stress levels just drop down. And
I can attest to that myself. Like, I've been to an archery range like 3 or 4 times previously to I've come today, and it was completely different how you explained it in relation to our movements and how that reflects our Islamic ihsan and our prayer and our tafakkur, as you were saying. As in, it just gave me a totally different sense of presence where I thought about when I released the arrow. Like, there's a lot more concentration, a lot more reflection that made it a lot more enjoyable as well. As in, it made it like it had meaning behind it, as opposed to just shooting some arrows for some fun. Do you get me?
Yeah, there's a hadith. The Prophet said, "Do not." He said, which means take to the bow and use it, as in practice it. It's not a play.
It's not a play. Exactly.
It's not a play where you think it's live. Like he mentioned it like in a way. Go and shoot the bow, and it's not a play. Like, don't look at it as a waste of time.
Yeah.
Because the area between the archer and his target is Rawda min Riyad al-Jannah. He said the area between the archer and his target is one of the gardens of paradise. And that's why the Ottomans used to take their shoes off when they would go and shoot archery. Out of respect of that hadith, they would take their shoes off. And also, there's a couple of other reasons, but all in all, archery teaches you. The Persians said, for example, teach your children 3 things before the age of 7. They said teach them wrestling, swimming, and telling the truth. The Seljuks added 2 things to these things: riding and archery.
Before 7.
Before 7. So by the age of 3, they used to put their children on sheep.
Sheep, yeah.
To harden them. And then by 13, they were fully fledged horsemen.
By 13?
By 13.
And archers as well?
They were battle hardened. They could go right into battle.
Wow.
Like, even I've done like archery once at a camp randomly, and this person's just like, just put this on and just shoot. In like 10 seconds you rock up to the shooting range. It's like, yeah, just get it and pull, and that's it. But then I remember, like, literally, I think the stage 1, stage 2, and you were teaching on stage 1 for like a good half an hour, like how you bring the bow up, release without the bow inside.
Yeah, it was 45 minutes. You didn't let us touch an arrow. I was like, when can we shoot?
Was it that fast?
But there's like a certain science behind it, and obviously you're relating to the Islamic kind of spiritual side of things whilst doing that. And then the stage 2 was obviously the whole motion, and then you put the bow, and then even during the bow you can't release it yet. Just try with the bow.
To just bring it back, take it back,
and then you can release it. SubhanAllah. Like, is there any more kind of gems you can share with us in regards to how kind of archery links with Islam,
and why it's so relevant for like youth here in like the Western world, where you would think something like that is sort of becoming not as like as in something of the past,
not applicable to our
not applicable. Yeah,
it's a very deep question and very deep topic. Why would archery be relevant to us?
That's what Boys in the Cave is about.
Yeah. You guys are very deep, mashallah, and it's very very good to. I feel comfortable to share everything I know, or the little I know about this. I'd probably say the archer's secret is the best answer to your question. And the archers, it takes years for an archer to reach from apprentice to master or accomplished archer.
Yeah.
And when you become a master, or not a master, but just an archer, qualified archer, it's there's a certain ceremony that the Turks used to do. They used to do a mawlid.
Yeah.
They used to cook certain foods. They would place food and water in the middle, and the archers used to do certain recitations, invocations, and du'as and dhikr, believing that there's a certain barakah that drops and charges this food with positivity or positive things. And they would eat that food. At the end of the ceremony, the master would give his student a bow in a certain way, in a certain hand, and whisper the archer's secret in his ear. According to most of the scholars, the archer's secret is an ayah that says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. And which you would roughly translate, it is not you who throws the arrow, Even if you threw it, it is not you who threw it. It is Allah who created that throw. It is you who only acquires the action. And I think the whole depth of archery is inside that ayah. The whole depth and the whole concept of archery is that fine line between you being a perfectionist and having that connection with the knowledge that not everything is in your hands. So you strive, you work so hard to achieve, you practice, and even though you practice, you know that it is all up to Allah and everything is under His will. So even if you practice and you sometimes miss, you will be at peace. No need to worry. You missed, khalas, you did your best. You missed, it was meant to be. But it also teaches you that you shouldn't be proud of yourself and just have pride in your ability and pride in, in a negative sense, but rather be humble. And I told you numerous times, pride is the worst enemy of the archer. And if pride is the worst enemy, then humility is his best friend.
Definitely.
And I think probably these two things is what the new youth today need most. A certain sense of humility and, a certain antidote to pride. Because a lot of the stuff that we own today, we have a feeling that we somehow own these things and they weren't given to us. Whilst most of us were given things. We haven't earned them. We haven't made them. Yeah. So we have this false sense of accomplishment that we need to sometimes, say, you know what? It wasn't me. So there's on many facades and many levels that we can talk, I'm sure, for hours about just the archer's secret alone. But if anything, consistency, focus, and a certain dose of meditation is what archery gives today's youth that they really sometimes need to slow things down.
It's like in the Dirish article, if people watch the series on Netflix, like a lot of the takeaway messages you get from it is the fact that, things happen, but you can be angry of who caused that thing to happen in the first place, but then or you can see it as that's the situation that's occurred. It's probably a sign, this demise has fallen on my tribe.
Exactly.
There's something for me to do. I'm doing something wrong spiritually even, and then fix that.
Yeah, and how do we fix it? How do we move on? How do we not just look in the past, but look to the future and try and better ourselves, rather than just, look at the fix to the situation, rather than just focus on the cause, or just look at, stop blaming others and just take some accountability yourself. Sometimes and I share this with my students. One day, this is truth because it happened to me. One day I was shooting really well and I was blitzing it, and there was just a perfect day where I had a perfect connection with my horse and everything just worked brilliantly, and I felt good about myself because I was hitting every time. It was just going really well. And next day I'd go and do archery and I missed every shot.
Wow.
And I was thinking, why? And I said, yesterday, Ahmed, you didn't hold yourself in check.
You felt good about yourself.
You felt good about yourself. You fell in love with yourself. And goes to, that's what archery is about. It's a very mental sport. It's a sport that you fight. You're fighting yourself. And there's a saying in archery, they're saying, if you're trying to hit the target and the bullseye, then you're missing the point. The real target is your nafs.
Wow.
SubhanAllah.
That just sums it up for us. Just touching on what you said about Ertugrul, as you were saying, as in we've lived lives where everything was sort of handed to us, is made really easy. Whereas these Turkish tribes, who are the best archers on their horsebacks, conquering lands, they had the harshest lives. They lived in the mountainous areas, and they migrated because they couldn't stay everywhere every season. So those were harsh lives that sort of fashioned the best archers of this world, you could say.
That is very true. But, the bows that they shot as well were very different. They were organic bows. They had minds of their own almost.
In what sense?
Well, the bows that you guys shot today are modern material called fiberglass. And the bow I shot today was
you had a wooden one?
It was wood impregnated with carbon fiber and all these different funky elements. Original bows, or horn bows, and sinew bows were different bows during the winter to summer. They were affected by the climate.
Because
so
of
moisture, if it was dry, if it was hot or cold,
wood is elastic,
it would throw the arrow differently and it would behave differently, right? And they had such a connection to their environments to their bow, first of all. They knew if the weather was like this today, right? They knew automatically my bow is going to shoot differently and he can aim differently and compensate for that. They had such a connection with the nature. They had such a connection with their surroundings that they were in tune. They were aware. And I think brings me to a very important point. In our club, we try to spread love. And I believe that love is an essential core that our community is lacking at the moment. That we need love, first of all, for the Prophet, for ourselves, for ourselves and our community, and how to build that community sense. But the ultimate goal is awareness. Awareness of yourself, awareness of your surroundings, and awareness of everything. So awareness of your religion, of your creator, that he is watching you. Having that constant awareness is I think, very, very important. And they had it because of the connection to the nature and because of the lives that they lived. It was forced on them.
And something else I was just curious about, as in you touched a bit on this when you were teaching us, is the difference between East and West. So you talked about the different grip, but was there a different sort of attitude towards archery as well? As in Muslims, we had this whole, we incorporated our Islam completely into our archery.
It was spiritual, not just Islam. It was also you've got archery style in Japan called Kyudo.
Oh,
Kyudo.
So the Asian cultures
have it. Chinese have it. It's East, West. It's not just Islam.
Oh, okay. It's
very much. It's
throughout the world.
It's the approach to an art itself. You have a mechanical approach, and then you have a sort of a transcending approach.
What's interesting is that throughout history, you have the West as more trying to progress intellectually, but then you have the East that have all the dominant kind of religions that were more spiritually inclined. It could be even analyzing Buddhism, for example, or Hinduism. It's more not so much on the intellectual side, but it's more fulfilling on the spiritual side. But then you have in the West, where it's all very intellectual and just through the...
More about mechanical, as in they weren't as concerned with this, or everything that we're bringing to the archery itself.
I would probably compare it to saying they were focused on the bullseye.
Yes, exactly.
The kuffar bull, concentrate on the bullseye.
Yeah, but look, ultimately, it's the whole purpose behind anything that a Muslim does is to better himself and how to make himself a better person in order to, bring that closeness and acceptance of the Creator. And I think, any sort of form or art that we applied ourselves to, had to carry a certain weight of, spiritual benefits or, because we were taught that, in our religion, to be aware, because that's what our religion teaches. Be aware that Allah sees you at all times, whatever you do. And that's why they apply themselves in a different, I think, way.
And changing gears a bit, we wanted to sort of look into your own background and what you came from as sort of embodying this art of the Ottoman Empire. And you, like you said yourself, you're Bosnian, and they were a certain part of the Ottoman Empire. Did that whole tradition play a part into why you got into it? As in, were you very aware of the history?
No.
Oh, you weren't?
No, I wasn't. And that's the part where I think is very important for our youth today, is we are not aware of the gems and all the treasures that we have in our own culture. And we're trying to fill that hole that we have in ourselves with other than that. And no matter how hard we try to fill it, it's not you. It's not me. Do you know what I mean? It's, okay, I have a lack, I feel a certain lack in sport, okay? And I feel I don't have a sense of accomplishment as a Bosniak, okay? Soccer, for example, Bosnians only play soccer. That's all we do. That's what
everyone plays.
Yeah, it's what everyone plays. But actually, we have a massive history in archery. We have a huge history in fencing, swordsmanship. We have the yatagan, which was a famous blade mostly used in Balkans. There's so much history. Like I mentioned, the Bosnian golden apple tree, which was a renowned tree used in bowyery for making the composite bow. So I wasn't aware of any of this. So archery allowed me to learn about my culture more, learn about my history more, and actually feel proud where I'm coming from. Actually feeling that my people have benefited and contributed to something in history.
Definitely. I think coming from a Bengali background as well, as in the subcontinental background you were speaking about earlier, there's so much in our own history that we're completely unaware of. As in, the things that, like, people of our background in our generation are aware of are usually the very superficial things, if I put it a certain way. Like the food, the dress, the things you can easily consume. As in, it's a very surface level. As you were saying about the soccer stuff, as in there's no depth to their understanding of their culture, like their language in Sanskrit and in Urdu, like you were saying. And you said something about a special Mughal bow.
Yeah. The crab bow.
The crab bow that was a part of the Mughal Empire that was different to any other bow developed
Don't
anywhere
even
else.
start me on that bow.
Okay, can you tell us a bit about it?
It's a love-hate relationship for most archers.
Oh, so most archers know about the bow.
Well, most thumb shooters respect the bow highly. And most archers stay away from that bow because it's notoriously powerful, fast, and hard to use.
Hard to use.
It's not easy.
To keep stable.
If you know anything about archery, you will there's names for the pieces of the bow. So the ear of the bow is called siya.
Yeah.
Siya. So the siya of this bow particularly is very long, and when you draw that bow, its limbs come beyond parallel. So
it comes down all the way.
It really looks impressive when you draw that bow in full draw. But it's also you have to use all your force to keep it stable. But unlike the Turks who shot light arrows very fast at long distances, and they shot a lot of arrows, the Mughals opted the other way. They shot heavy war arrows that were like, thick, affairs that would just pierce anything that they hit.
Every armor.
And exactly. So there was an interesting narration of in the 1800s, early 1800s, when the British, 1700s, should I say, when the British were sending a volley, and I don't think it was a Muslim general at the time. It was, I think, somebody Raj.
1700s.
Yeah.
As in the British were sending a convoy or something.
When the British were fighting the Mughals and the Indians.
Yeah.
Because back during the Mughal Empire, the Hindus were common to fight together with the Muslims.
Yeah.
Because they had a sense of belonging and they had a sense of harmony. But we won't go into that. They said this British soldier, they shot a volley at the Indians, and one man was late to bob his head down and received a Mughal arrow piercing his entire skull and coming out the back in a foot long. And this was them riding down.
This was in the memoirs.
It's very gore.
You can find this.
It's very gore and ugly to see, I'm sure. But it just goes to show the power of this bow. It was able to pierce a man's skull through and through.
Through the bone.
Through the bone and through the back, and pierce out a foot long. And, they're known to kill tigers with this bow. Yeah, so it takes a lot to kill a tiger. It's a very interesting bow. It's the only bow that's made out of seven pieces. And every other bow is made out of 5 or 3.
Have you used that bow yourself?
Yes, I've drawn it once.
You've drawn it once?
Yes, it's a mighty bow. I must say it's very impressive. But I myself am a fan of a Turkish bow, which is a derivative of the Mughal bow, and I'm of the opinion that you should shoot lighter arrows. And shoot them fast.
It's a lot more accessible than having to pull very heavy.
Yeah.
Very heavy
The Mughals have their own, but every country and every people have their own fighting styles in history, and I think if you look at that, you can learn a lot about them, and in the way that they approach warfare and the way that they approached certain arts.
It's like archery was its own sort of artistic expression of every people's, like how people had their own artwork,
Absolutely,
their own architecture. Archery is like another manifestation.
Absolutely.
But like nobody even thinks of that. They think, archery, bow and arrow in history. But it's
so much more.
There's so much more to it. Yeah. It's so beautiful.
Do it after camp.
Yeah.
Like school camp, just shoot some arrows. Yeah, that's it.
It's so beautiful as well. The different sort of pieces it comes together, the way you draw it, everything.
Absolutely. Even the decorations on the bow. Because Turkish soldiers used to decorate their bows with often with ayah Qur'aniyah.
Yeah.
But also they would put flowers on. While the Persians, they would use animals and people to draw on their bows. So it's very different. You can tell a Persian style calligraphy on the bow to a Ottoman or a Seljuk style.
Yeah.
To a Japanese style, for example, or Chinese style. They're all different.
With you were mentioning before about the Ottoman history, but with your own kind of heritage, so Bosnia, what's the two connections between Bosnia and Ottoman Empire?
Well, there's a massive connection. We received, so Islam came through Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih. He was the conqueror of Bosnia. At that time, Bosniaks were part of a religion called Bogumil.
Okay, so is this
it was a fringe of Christianity. It was Christianity,
Not
but
Trinitarian.
yeah, they used to believe they did not attribute godhood to Jesus.
Yeah.
They refused to say that. That's why they were persecuted by the Romans and also the Orthodox.
So they saw Isa alayhi salam as a prophet.
They would never call him his son. That's one thing they wouldn't do, and they would not allocate. They would say that God does not resemble anything. So they had that.
Aqidah in check.
Well,
Almost.
I'm not sure, but that's what I was taught as a child.
Yeah.
So when the Ottomans came, it was a very natural progression for the Bosniaks to embrace Islam. And then Ottomans ruled Bosnia for a long period of time. It was close to 700 years. And even till this day, they have a heavy influence. When I went to Istanbul, the moment you said Bosniak, anyone in Turkey, they're like, Bosniak, buyurun. And they really treated you with a lot of respect. And I was like, why do they like me so much? Nobody knows about Bosnia outside. Yeah. And I asked them the question. I asked actually Murat Zweri and a couple of others. I said, why do you guys like Bosniak so much? He goes, two reasons, they told me. First reason is, historically, Bosniaks are the only people who volunteered their sons for the Janissary Corps. Out of all the Balkan states, it was an honor for us to send our best sons to the Janissary Corps. So it was, they respect that.
Yeah.
And that was the only Janissary volunteer corps out of all the Janissary corps. And the second reason is because when the Bosniaks migrated from Bosnia, we came in waves. When we migrated, they tended to work and not be needy of others. Yeah. And Turks respected that, the fact that they're entrepreneurial and they try to work for a living rather than try to, find the easy way out. They're hard work.
So when they migrated to Turkey, as in they held their own community.
They held, and they actually, a lot of them brought funds and opened businesses and,
so they made their economy flourish sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was actually, they were really welcomed in the Turkish community because they bettered it rather than, being a burden on someone.
Yeah.
They actually brought with them skills, abilities, and they enriched the community rather than, be a burden on it. And that's, when you look at it, there's a hadith, al-mu'minu kal-matar. The mu'min should be like rain. Wherever it falls, it benefits.
It makes the
land grow, Yes, so that's how we should have, in terms of an attitude. Wherever you fall, you should, get on your 2 feet and make a contribution.
Bring the place to life.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned about the Ottoman Empire. They're obviously, welcoming to the Bosnians because they were like rain, essentially. So was the Ottoman Caliphate over its reign, like it ruled for about 1,000 years from memory, right? 800, I think. 800. Yeah. So were they a just empire in that sense for that whole reign?
That is a very controversial
that's a very edgy question, about the whole Ottoman Empire.
You are asking somebody who's probably bordering bias towards the Ottomans, and I have a very positive view because Bosnia had nothing to lose and everything to gain from the Ottoman Empire. So if you look at what they've done, it's an interesting question. I have a Lebanese student, and the Lebanese were colonized by the French, right? Yeah. So he said, what about the Ottomans, They didn't give us anything. The French, at least we got their language. And it's funny because there was another Lebanese guy present at the moment. He said, that's funny because the Ottomans ruled you for 800 years and you retained who you are. And the French didn't even leave your language. They forced another language on you. So the whole purpose of Ottomani controlling the Middle East, and I said earlier, during the Ottoman Empire, Middle East never in its history had a longer period of peace. It was about 800 years of peace because the Ottomans took on the Middle East under their umbrella, protected the people, and left them alone.
Left the Arabs alone. Yeah.
And they went and learned from them, right? Whilst other cultures who colonized the region didn't. They tried to impose their will on them. So the most the most precious commodity of the Ottoman Empire was life. And that's the whole concept of slavery in the Ottoman Empire. It was different to the concept of, when you say slavery in terms of the cotton trade in American terms. It was, you could be a slave and yet have a career path and a highly influential position and also help your family and have rights. Detailed rights.
Scholars as well.
Exactly. But, the whole point of enlisting as a slave was, at the end, you're going to get your papers as a free man with a job and a purpose.
It was a totally different idea of slave to how we understand it as...
Slavery is completely different in the West to the East.
European chattel slavery, as in that was the true definition of slavery.
Yeah, it was like almost robotics.
It was more like a sort of servitude for a bit.
It was a career path.
It was a career path, yeah, exactly. So I heard if you're the slaves of very elite noble people, then you had a better life than most people in the street. As in,
well, it's funny you should say, because the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan could not order the execution of any layman. He didn't have that power. He couldn't say, "I'll go and execute such and such," unless it was his close personal guard, and who were all slaves. Only then he had that discretion. Otherwise, he didn't have the power. But it's just slightly different to the West and the whole concept. But Bosnia and everybody else, definitely, I think the world benefited. The Serbians, even who despise the Ottomans and the Turks, have a saying: when their taxes get high, they say, we wish the Turks would conquer us again. Because honestly, in those times, the Balkans were they were going through a rough patch.
Yeah.
Their emperors or their kings would tax them heavily, right? And they had no lives. They had nothing. When the Ottoman came, their tax just dropped to nearly nothing. All they had to do, they were free men. They could worship and do whatever they wanted. All they did is pay the jizya, which is like a small percentage of what a Muslim has to pay for zakat.
Yeah.
And they would get all the benefits of the infrastructure of an Islamic empire, all the education system, everything that comes with it, in all its beauties and complexities for a minimal fee.
Just to speak some final words on the Balkan states and the sort of situation there. Mm-hmm. You were mentioning to me earlier just how I told you how complicated a place it is to sort of understand the historical politics of it and everything, the allegiances and the sort of rivalries. Mm-hmm. And you told me in particular about the Bosnian people. There was it one of the people that conquered Bosnia had a dream about what the future of the place would be like.
Yeah, you want to share that? That was pretty amazing.
So we were talking, I think I was touching on the practice of your heritage,
yes,
right?
Yes.
If your culture and where you are from does not go against the religion or the core of the religion, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm a very firm believer that not every bid'ah is bad.
Yeah.
Just like not every eye is a zaniya in the hadith. So there's good and bad bid'ah. Yeah? All right. So we were talking about Mawlid, for example.
Which
is a bid'ah, but it is a good bid'ah.
Yeah.
And I learned from so many things from Mawlid. And in Bosnia, it's, the Turks entrenched things like Mawlid, dhikr, after salat and certain actions. And then I went and spoke to you guys about what I learned from my youth, where poems would be recited about, certain events. And Mawlid is one of them. And they recite this, the poem of the conquest of Bosnia.
Yeah.
And of Sultan Muhammad Fatih coming to Bosnia.
Right, yeah.
When he entered Sarajevo, he told the army not to camp and not to move. That was the only time that he told the army not to camp and not to move. They were in a state of limbo.
Didn't know what to do.
Didn't know what's going on for 3 days. They were like, do we stay here? Do we move on? What's happening? Whilst he prayed istikhara. Because these men were really men. They reported into people who were knowledgeable. They were humble to accept their advice. So he prayed istikhara. And he saw in his istikhara basically was whether this land will remain on Islam.
Yeah.
So he needed to make plans. Is he going to build schools? Is he going to build masajid? Is he going to make a foundation for the ummah in that land or not?
So he was asking Allah for that. So
he was asking enlightenment from Allah. Yeah. He was asking answers. And he saw in his dream a fire And around the fire, he saw Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salam. He saw Sayyidina Uthman, Abu Bakr, Siddiq, Ali ibn Abi Talib. And when he woke up, because the army was accompanied by scholars in the old times, he went to the scholars who were able and qualified to interpret this dream for him. And they told him, they said, it's good because you saw Sayyidina Rasul and the fire. The fire is La ilaha illallah and Rasul is Muhammad Rasulullah.
So that will be in this land.
They will be in this land.
Yeah.
They will stay. You saw Sayyidina Abu Bakr. That means people here will be generous.
Yeah.
And you saw Sayyidina Ali. People of this land will be knowledgeable. And you saw Sayyidina Uthman. It means people will have something we call marhamat. It means goodness or how can I say forgiveness?
Yeah.
You know,
people will be like soft-hearted.
Soft-hearted.
Yeah.
And but you didn't see Omar. And Omar represents justice. There will be a lack of justice in this land. And I think that sums up the story of Bosnia very well. Because we as a people, we have a lot of things, but we just lack the justice, for the layman.
For the people of Bosnia, and how they've been affected by so many, just the world wars of Europe, I guess.
Well, not just Bosnia, but all others.
All of the other states,
all the others.
Definitely.
But it goes back to also a funny thing, how all the Sahaba had a certain attributes.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of archery, because they say when you're building a bow, you need the attributes of Imam Ali. Oh, yeah. And when you are building an arrow, you need the attributes of Sayyidina Uthman or Umar.
SubhanAllah. All this linkage.
The arrow needs Sayyidina Umar.
So the attributes, Sayyidina Umar was known to be a man who does not waver, and he was a man of precision.
Precision, yeah.
Yeah? And Sayyidina Ali was a man of transcending knowledge. His knowledge transcended. So knowledge of nature, knowledge of weather, knowledge of just a holistic,
just how to bring it all together.
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny, the attributes we should strive for. If you're a Bowyer, it will enlighten you to be like him. And if you're a Fletcher, it will enlighten you to be like someone else.
Yeah.
And what you should strive for. It's quite interesting. But yeah, a lot of our heroes are misplaced in today's society.
I think that's a beautiful way to kind of wrap up the episode, because it kind of encapsulates Islam into the sense of, characteristics of the, pious predecessors, and also Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and archery, and also history in general, making that connection.
And how it all comes back together.
SubhanAllah. And I think that's what Boys in the Cave is about, because it's about having these sort of conversations or dialogue that, you're not exposed to these things in high school. You're not going to talk about history. I had a funny story I tell everyone, is that I didn't even know Ottomans were Muslim when I was studying in Year 10. It's like the Ottomans. I thought it was some race or something. I don't even know. SubhanAllah. But they actually
not just high school. Even in university. You don't learn these things about your religion. Just the depth to it, the history to it,
and
culture.
Exactly.
Culture to it.
And we're uncovering this in Boys in the Cave. Even the art of archery and how it links so much with Islam, and making, just seeing those connections. And I think this has been an amazing episode for me. But,
definitely, yeah.
So I think, we'll just wrap it up. So for our listeners, thank you so much for giving us your attention. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at boysinthecave@gmail.com, or find us on Facebook, and you can also follow our journey through Instagram. Please leave a 5-star rating on iTunes, as that greatly helps us. A lot of people have issues with giving us ratings. It's the podcast app on your iPhone, if you have an iPhone. So you look for that, you go on, subscribe to Boys in the Cave, search us up, and then you can give us, if you scroll down our page, you'll see the 5-star rating, and you can leave a review, inshallah. And also, if you want to speak with us, message us, talk to us, feel free to do so. Alhamdulillah, we've been getting amazing messages from people all around the world, America, UK. It's been, subhanAllah, amazing journey. So inshallah, make dua for us in that sense. And essentially with Ahmed, he runs obviously an archery club. It's called Maydaan Archery Club.
Australia.
So I'll put all the links in the show notes, but like him on Facebook, give him a follow on Instagram. You're on Instagram, right?
Not yet. We will be.
All right, Facebook it is. All our listeners have Facebook, inshallah. So give them, support them. Even, I know a lot of people in Sydney listen to this podcast. Literally, it's in near Leppington. So you put I'll do the address, everything on our Facebook.
It's not too far. Even me from the eastern suburbs to get there, just 35 minutes.
Yeah,
it's well worth the drive out.
Do one class, subhanAllah. You'll see, you know, Brother Ahmed will actually go through with you and everything. It's been an amazing experience today for me.
That's the best archery you can do in Sydney.
Exactly. Yeah. It's non-for-profit to support them, you know what I mean? Inshallah. So, yeah, from our special guest Ahmed, Josh and myself, we wish you all the best. This is Tanzim signing off. Assalamu alaikum.